Okay, everybody, we're going to introduce you to enzymes. There are guided notes in a CAMI for this section. For those of you that are at home, people that are actually in the classroom are using paper copies. They're pretty easy to fill in, so just stick with the guided notes to help you kind of stay engaged with this. So, first thing we're going to do is define some very basic terms, and they can be a little confusing because these are terms you've heard of before, and we don't want you to confuse them with sort of like the everyday way they're used in language. First one's metabolism, and you may think that's all about diets. It's a super important part of diet. But you've probably heard people say, well, I have a fast metabolism. I can eat as much as I want. I never gain weight. Or you've probably heard people say, I have a slow metabolism, and I can, I'll eat one French fry and gain a pound. That's definitely part of it, but let's go with a little bit more broad, truly biological definition. Metabolism is they're very easy. All chemical reactions in an organism, okay? Organisms are basically just bags of meat, and when you put all the reactions that's going on together in that bag of meat or plant, then we are talking about metabolism. I tend to be very human focused in my biology, so forgive me, plant lovers. All right, picking this back up, we were talking about what metabolism was. There are different metabolic pathways, and biologists have these posters, I guess, diagrams that show all these different lines going different directions and things like that. And they're the different metabolic pathways, maybe in an organ or even a whole organism. And like I said at the start of the lecture, sometimes we think of metabolism as like, I start with, up at the top there, I start with this, those are my reactants, and I get this, and those are my products. Biology is usually a little bit more complex than that. And so a lot of times you'll have all these intermediate steps between these reactions, and each one requires its own set of enzymes. So you might have 2, 3, maybe even more enzymes in each one of these that are modifying the original substrate. That's what we'll talk more about that later. That's what the enzyme acts upon. And it does one little change to it. Then that we would call that an intermediate. Then it would go again and it'd be another intermediate. And then we'd have the final product. So in metabolism, we see these really high levels of complexity where multiple enzymes are doing multiple things in response to different cellular conditions. So we call those pathways. We've been talking about these pathways. And these pathways, there's two main kinds of them, and I'm going to give you some memory tools for these. The first one is catabolic, and this is just a little mnemonic here. The word cat, well, I think of the actual animal cat, okay? And I think of a naughty cat that has a lot of energy it wants to release. So my little cat, with its whiskers here, is going to use its claws to tear up my really nice big armchair, okay? And it's just tearing it up, tearing it up, tearing it up. It has so much energy, it's breaking my chair into little pieces, okay? So the cat is releasing its energy and breaking the chair down into little pieces. That's how I remember catabolic. Catabolic reactions or catabolic pathways release energy. My cat needs to release energy. And it breaks things into smaller pieces. My naughty cat is breaking the chair into smaller pieces. So that's my little catabolic memory tool. Okay? All right. Anabolic pathways. Where do you hear the word anabolic? Sometimes tied to another word that you might hear. Say it again. Anabolic steroids, okay? Anabolic steroids build molecules, so you might think of those as being used by bodybuilders. Now, not all bodybuilders, but it's just a little memory tool. And bodybuilding consumes a lot of energy. So these reactions are consuming energy, and the other ones, the catabolic ones, are releasing energy. It might be a nice idea to make a little chart that organizes all these. You've got your catabolic and anabolic, okay? Catabolic, release, and I'm going to use abbreviations. Anabolic, consume. Okay, release and consume energy. You should probably put energy out here on the side. I don't have a lot of room to work with. Next, catabolic, breakdown. Anabolic, build. And then lastly, it kind of goes right with break it into simple. And the next one is they build more complex. All right. So catabolic and anabolic. Let me give you some examples. You tell me if it's catabolic or anabolic. Okay? Cells need to build new proteins because of an injury. Would that be anabolic or catabolic? Yeah, I said the word build right in the question, so perfect. Your body or cells have some sort of toxin in them that gets broken down. That's obviously catabolic, okay? So be able to answer questions like that based on, these memory tools I'm giving you. Here's a nice little picture of it. The cat breaks things down. The anabolic builds things together, like Legos, puts them together. The cat wants to release all of its energy. Okay, so the energy is released. In the anabolic, it's kind of hard to see here, but the energy is going in or absorb. Okay? So, just another way to look at it in more sort of visual diagram type form. All right. Let's give some definitions here. This is going back to some of your more physics stuff here, maybe some chemistry too. Energy is the ability to do work, and in physics we can kind of consider work the ability to change the state of something. Let's talk a little bit more about that on a biological level. All organisms need energy to survive and function. And this is mainly because we're taking things out of the environment that are disorganized and we're organizing them. Okay? Any loss of energy long term is going to cause death. Okay? Well, what's the definition of death? Death is when metabolic reactions stop. In humans, not all, but the majority of death can be traced back to the brain, okay? Almost all causes of human death are lack of oxygen to the brain. Lack of oxygen to the brain means lack of energy to the brain. The brain uses huge amounts of energy. Let's say you're in a really bad accident and you're bleeding out. What really is going to kill you is not the lack of blood. It's not enough blood to keep energy in your brain, okay? You have a heart attack. Your heart's not beating right. Maybe it's not beating at all. You're not moving enough blood to your brain to keep the energy in your brain at a minimal level. Okay? All these things are very basic, but it's all about energy. Death is the shutdown of metabolism. Metabolism takes energy. Okay. A little bit more about energy. There's different kinds. I know you know these, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them. Kinetic energy is motion. Thermal energy is the motion of atoms. So thermal energy is a form of kinetic energy because it's vibration of particles. Potential energy comes in all different kinds. You can have elastic potential energy, gravitational potential energy, chemical potential energy. And chemical energy, like we're mainly going to concentrate on just these types. There's other types electromagnetic energy. But we're really electromagnetic is a type of thermal. So, no, it's not. Well, I should probably be quiet. I'm going to get mixed up here. Electromagnetic is not the movement of particles, it's waves. But anyway, back to this. A lot of biological energy is focused around chemical potential energy, where different substances are storing energy. That could be sugar, ATP. There's a lot of ways we can pull that off. Lipids and fats. So this is these are big sort of laws in thermodynamics. There are a couple different laws. There's even one they call, not the first, second, or third. There's one they call the 0th law of thermodynamics. That just says, like, if A and B are in if A and B are in thermodynamic balance, then and B is in balance with C, then it's like arithmetic. Then C will be in balance with A. We're not going to worry about that one, but a couple of them that we're going to look at here. So thermodynamics, you just break the word down. Thermo is heat, dynamics is change. So how is heat changing? Now, this can be a little confusing because these laws apply to the universe as a whole, okay? And you might look at a single life form and say, well, that life form is becoming more organized, so that violates these laws, because one of the laws is things become disordered. All right, so let's look at how that works. So you've got our little friend here. It looks like he's having a good little snack here. And the first law related to the squirrel is he's not creating energy. He's using the potential energy stored in the food. Okay? In this case, it looks like some kind of nut or something. Once he eats it, the energy doesn't disappear. It's going to get used for metabolism, and most of it's going to be released as heat. So animals don't create energy. Plants don't create energy. They transform it. So you can't create it or destroy it, but you can transfer or transform it. So this guy's transferring the energy inside of that food with his metabolism. All right. So that's basically what I outlined for you there at the bottom. Potential chemical energy stored in the food, transferred into kinetic energy, like when the squirrel climbs a tree or something. Which is what I have a picture of on the next slide. So our little friend here, he's climbing the tree. The energy in the nut is what's powering that. But not 100% of that energy is used. Some of it just gets wasted, and we can never recapture it. Okay? And we call this like disorganization of energy. We call it entropy. Okay? Energy basically spreads out. I drink a lot of coffee during the day. Even though I put it in this insulated container, the heat in that coffee eventually spreads out into the room. I don't like cold coffee. I can't go and just like capture all that heat in this room and put it back. That energy it's not destroyed. The room is a little bit warmer because of it. But again, I just can't pull the energy out of the desk, my coffee cup warmed up, and it spreads out, and the energy is so disorganized that we can never get it back. And the universe is constantly increasing in entropy. All the energy in the universe is eventually going to become so disordered that chemical reactions are not going to be able to happen. And that's really getting into some big cosmology there. But on a whole, the universe is becoming more disorganized. It probably feels like that every day, but that's not what we're talking about. Okay, a little bit more. What I just went over right here. During an energy transfer, The energy is, in some portion, it's going to be unusable, and we're going to lose it in the form of heat. Okay? If you've ever driven your car, got out, especially in the summer, you can feel the warmth coming off the car. It's not, we capture some of that energy because our car has a heater in it, but that energy becomes disorganized, lost out to the environment, and we never get it back anymore. There are people who are very good at designing machines to recapture as much of that lost energy as possible. We like machines to be efficient, but we can never totally eliminate this, okay? A good example of this would be, let's say I have a frog. There's my little frog. And some sort of mosquito lands on him, drinks his blood. Well, now he can just be like, well, I'll just eat the mosquito. Frogs eat bugs. The frog could not survive that way, okay? And that's because every time that energy is transferred, so we have a transfer going like this, some of it's lost. So you can't make these systems that sort of circulate forever. This is one of the problems with, like, say, closing everyone up in a spacecraft and saying, we'll just survive. Well, you got to have some input of energy. You got to have some input of energy, or else the system will collapse. It'll just collapse into disorganization and heat. So, when our squirrel friend here climbs a tree, his muscles get warm, and we lose some of that in the form of heat. Now, we often think of this heat as only being in animals, like, body heat. Reptiles, snakes, and insects, they don't have body heat. That's not necessarily true. Whenever you are using any kind of chemical reaction that releases, let me just say it this way, a huge number of metabolic processes release heat. There's a really famous experiment you can do where you take a seed and you germinate it and you put it on a temperature probe. So this probe over here is hooked up to some kind of screen. When the seed germinates, it will get slightly, and we're not talking like this thing's going to be burning a hole in the cup, but it'll get a degree or two warmer than room temperature because the seed, when it germinates, starts using lots of the stored energy in the seed, and those chemical reactions give off heat. So even plants have like entropy and lose, and the energy in them becomes more disorganized. So a lot of kids, a lot of students struggle with this, and I want to kind of challenge you to think about this for a second. So I'm going to let you read this, and then we'll talk about it. Okay, so in this situation here, we have a cell. It's taking things in from the environment, maybe little pieces, and making them into something more complex that folds up into some kind of cool-looking protein. Boy, that sure doesn't sound like entropy. Things are becoming more organized, okay? So that cell is violating these laws of thermodynamics. Well, we have to really look at this carefully because you can't just look at the cell. You have to look at like the whole system. And that whole system really means the whole universe. Entropy in the cell technically did decrease. Things became more organized. But the system as a whole, because the squirrel gives off simpler molecules in the form of waste product, we do have an increase in entropy. So be very careful because a lot of people will argue that life decreases entropy. It does in a very local area. It does not in the whole universe. And life needs tons of energy to maintain that organization. Here's another one. This is a little tree here that shows things becoming more complex over the evolutionary time scale. Well, things are going from low levels of complexity to higher levels of order. So the organisms, again, they may decrease their entropy, but the total level of the whole universe does go up with all their waste products and lost energy.